Today our gospel passage kind of focuses on what we could call it's easy to fall into, the little trap of being overly criticism, this overly criticism or overly criticizing other people. And it's a lot easier to look at other people's faults than our own, huh? And that's what Jesus is kind of getting at. We would, anytime we'd fall into this in the seminary, then usually someone would sit us down and say, okay, worry about your own formation. You've got enough to do, enough work to do on yourself. Not enough time to think about somebody else. So worry about your own formation. In the early, with all usually the early desert fathers, they used to, and some of the spiritual writers, they would write about it and say this is for them, what they would try to do is to guard against this overly criticism of other people and trying to be almost like a police against other people's sins, like a sin detector. They would say, I keep my sin ever before my eyes. They would keep their sin and their weaknesses to temptation in the forefront of their mind, so that they would see that first before they look at other people and their actions, and it would keep them pretty humble. So it'll keep your sin in front of you to beat yourself up over it, or to hang it over you, or to keep you down, but just to keep you humble. And keep it in a right perspective when you're looking at other people and their own struggles and challenges that they wrestle with. And an easy practical example of this could be alcoholics and Alcohol Anonymous, or any of those kind of addiction places that have these different steps to lead you towards freedom. What's the first basic step of the alcoholic? Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic. I have this problem. I have a problem with alcoholism, or a problem with whatever it is, a problem with anger, a problem, whatever your weakness is, and whatever your problem is, whatever my problem is, you replace it with that. My name is Alex, and I have a problem with... You thought I was going to answer, huh? Think about the alcoholic. My name is so-and-so, or even when they come into confession, bless me, Father, I have sinned. It's been so long since my last confession. I'm an alcoholic, meaning I struggle with alcoholism. I've been sober for 5 years. Thank God. But notice, see the pattern? They always acknowledge, this is a problem I have in my life. Now, if I let my guard down, I'll fall right into it. And there goes the sobriety. And then here comes the enslavement. And you and I have that same problem with some sin in our life. Every single one of us is wrestling with some sin in our life. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here. God would have pulled us up to heaven already. But because you and I are still here, it's clear we all have a sin, at least one sin in our life we're still wrestling with. We all have work to do in perfecting and growing and maturing our love. So we've got something we're all working on. My name is so-and-so, and here I have a problem with this. Maybe I have a problem with anger. Maybe I haven't ripped anybody's head off in 10 years. That's good news. But I know if I don't watch myself, the rage of that anger might come out, That's just an example, whatever it could be. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be something else. Maybe someone's power hungry, control hungry, whatever. Whatever it is in your life, this is how you keep it ever in front of your mind, to keep you humble. It says, I have a problem with this. This is one of the big weaknesses in my life, the thorn in my side that God will not remove, like St. Paul, because he tells me his grace is sufficient for me to keep going, to sustain me, to keep wrestling and growing in holiness. I have a problem with this, but I've been sober from this problem for however long. But I know if I don't watch myself, I'll fall right back into it. This is how the desert fathers and mothers, this is how some of the spiritual writers keep their sin ever in the forefront of their mind. I got a problem with this, Hard to judge my neighbor for their problem when I recognize I got a problem too. Instead of judging them, I'll start to pray for them. Because I want them to pray for me and my problem too, See how it changes the perspective on everything and how we see each other and our sins that we wrestle with. There's also a line that they would say when you look at somebody else and their problems. It could be sin, it could just be their state in life. You could look at a homeless person. So the Jews, here's Jesus is addressing the problem with the Jews back then is if you were struggling or in your life, if you were homeless or you had some kind of deformity physically, they would say, well, you have that because you've sinned or somebody in your family sinned. That's why you're homeless. Straighten up your life and all of a sudden you won't be homeless anymore. Somehow God will give you money. See, so this is how they were judging. This is what Jesus is addressing, this kind of judging. Oh, you're deformed. Oh, you're blind. It's because somebody in your family sinned. You guys are sinners. You're all messed up. We're more holy than you. See, that's what Jesus is addressing 2,000 years ago. That's the judging he's talking about. It's not when you actually see a sin and you judge it a sin. That's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus tells us to do that. Jesus says you can judge them by the fruits they bear. Can judge a tree by the fruit it bears. So he does tell us to judge. He's addressing a different kind of judging 2,000 years ago that we don't do today. So the other line is, if not for the grace of God, there go I. If not for the grace of God, I would be homeless. If not for the grace of God, I'd be wrestling with that struggle, with that addiction. If not for the grace of God, I could be that person right there. So how could I look down on that person? Or how could I judge that person or think lesser of that person? If not for God's graciousness in my life, there go I. Another way for us to stay humble and be grateful for what God has given us. And again, instead of throwing out a judgment or a criticism against somebody, we spend time instead praying for them. Lord, help that person. Because I need help. They need help too.